Welcome to the Every Night is Game Night preview series, the show where designers and publishers share their passion and answer critical questions about their Kickstarter projects. If you're on the fence about a pledge, this is the show for you.
Every Night is Game Night Preview Series, Episode 22, Unbroken, with the designer, Artem Safarov. Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome back to Every Night is Game Night Preview Series. And this time, we have a treat for you. Not only do we have the designer of Unbroken on here, I had to go and ask one of our good friends in the solo community to help me out. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome on the show Liz Davidson. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Liz Davidson, you are from where?
I keep a website for solo reviews at www.beyondsolitaire.net, and I am also Beyond Solitaire on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube.
And that is where you will find a preview video for the game we are featuring today, Unbroken. I have made him sit there long enough for our introductions. Artem, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, so you have been quite the hustler, getting around to the solo peoples, reaching out to us, getting coverage for your game. I mean, this has been pretty cool. So yeah, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us, before we get into the game Unbroken, we like to get to know the people behind, the designers behind all these projects. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got into this.
Sure thing. Yep. So this is my second Kickstarter for a board game. The first one was called Cauldron, a board game of competitive alchemy, and that was something that I've done in 2015. So we've met our goal for that. It was a very fun, successful campaign for this kind of fun, interactive, confrontational game. So it did really well. And we liked the experience so much that I thought that it would be fun to do another one. So after the dust has settled a little bit, and my personal life took some time to recover after all the time that you invest into something like running a Kickstarter, here I am a year and a half after I've started working on Unbroken, the game that you mentioned. I think I am ready to bring it to Kickstarter on March 27th, which I guess is today, since that's when the episode is going to air. Mm-hmm. So I found it too much fun to be creating games to stop doing it, so I keep plugging away at it. And I think with Unbroken, I struck onto something really special.
Do you have your own company, by the way?
I do. It's called Ultima Games, which is a very creative mashup of names of people in my family. You can find more about it at ultimagames.com, about the games that we make, about the people behind it, and about all the fun creative projects that we are participating in.
Yeah, let's talk about Unbroken. I feel the excitement about it. You were talking about you feel like you stumbled upon something really, really special here. For the solo community, this is a one-player game. Is that correct?
That is a one-player only game.
And it is a one-player dungeon crawler. So if that sounds familiar to you, one-player card-based tiny little dungeon crawler, we are going to get into a comparison of this game and that other big looming juggernaut that has hit our solo player tables over the last couple of years. But maybe just for the beginning, you can give us a little bit of an executive summary of what is Unbroken and what do you do and how do you go through it?
Unbroken is a game of perseverance in the face of adversity, a game about getting up after falling down. It starts with the most cliché premise that you can ever imagine. A group of adventurers descend into a dungeon. Except unlike most other dungeon crawlers where you go happily, murdering monsters and collecting their loot and leveling up, here the monsters ambush you and your group is wiped out. And you are the only person who is left alive. And you see that basically the only way out of this godforsaken place that claimed the lives of your comrades is to get back up, try to patch up your wounds, try to find some materials that could serve as kind of weapons, and make it back out through the monsters that are guarding the exit. So it's kind of getting out of the dungeon as opposed to descending deeper into it. So The game itself is a one-player only. It's focused mostly around resource management, and the game is all about how you go through the dungeon, basically meeting different encounters there, hopefully preparing you to take out the monsters that prevent you from getting out. Unlike many of the chunkier solo games out there, Unbroken is really short. You can play it in like 20 to 30 minutes easily. 15 once you know what you're doing. And for me, it was always the kind of game that you are always able to play. Because I think lots of our solo player folks in the community play solo games not because solo is their preferred way to play, but rather because it's difficult to slot in gaming otherwise, be it because of you're strapped for time, because it's difficult to schedule things with other people. But for me, one of the goals and one of the interestingly things that I've noticed the role that Unbroken takes in my own life, because I'm strapped for time and I don't have easy access to other players, is that it's so easy to get to the table. And in that category, it really joins some of the games that have inspired it. Friday, of course, being a big, I think, solo staple, but also One Deck Dungeon and things like Lost Expedition. I think it's always great to have these games that are, they run around half an hour and you can just like take them off the shelf, play something, put it back, keep going on about your day. And if your only option at that time is Mage Knight or something, then you would be settling for not playing anything at all. So to me, it was always very important to give the opportunity for people to have the game that they will always be able to play without any or with very small restrictions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So Liz, you did the video. Artem was nice enough to provide you with a prototype. Would tell us about your experience putting together the game and playing it.
So first of all, I was very happy to get a prototype of this game because I am always happy to see solo-only games show up. I still feel like solo mode is more common, but a solo-only game is still kind of a rarity. So when I broke out the prototype, the first thing I was wondering is how close to One Deck Dungeon is this going to be?
Yeah, there it is. You said it. You said it.
I thought you meant...
I'll be real. But I mean, I enjoy One Deck Dungeon. I reviewed it positively on my site. I've done a playthrough of that game as well. But I think for me, what was distinctive about Unbroken is that you have a lot more control over how your player is going to do. It's lucky in the sense that there's an exploration phase in which you draw 2 cards and you get to choose which one you want to take. So what resource do I want to take? How much time do I want to take before I have to confront a monster? So there's a lot of good resource management going on there, but there's still a very strong element of choice. So you get to choose how you're going to build that character. What weapon am I going to upgrade to? How much time, which is a major resource in the game, am I going to spend on a certain project? Can I get a skill that will let me work around some of the other deficiencies that I have? And I sort of feel like that level of choice made me feel like I had more responsibility for what happened to my character than I do in games where I'm just rolling dice. And I thought that was very interesting.
I'm glad you mentioned that because so there's thinking in One Deck Dungeon to strategy, but the strategy comes mid-fight. So you don't really think about building your character like you do. You get, if you beat a monster, you have to figure out if it's going to be an item or a skill, but that ultimately doesn't take that long. I think the game is like, how do you, switch out the dice and how do you like manipulate and everything? Like that's where a lot of the kind of tactical stuff goes on. Looking at Unbroken, it feels like there's kind of that more like, how do I mold my character into something that can kind of survive the thing? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry to jump in.
No.
Liz, go ahead.
Yeah, it's your game.
Hey, dude.
Well, yeah, I think that was the design of it, is to try to force the players to plan in a flexible way so that whatever they end up building in terms of, the set of resources that they have collected or the skills or the weapon that their character possesses is suited to meet certain challenges. And then you're never quite sure which one of these challenges you're going to encounter. You may meet a monster who's heavily armored, and then the, armor-piercing weapon that you've created is going to be put to great use. Or maybe, otherwise you can meet something that just has a whole lot of health and no armor, and then investing into armor-piercing is a bad idea. And so simultaneously, you could think that, okay, maybe I got the armor-piercing side covered, so maybe now I should look into other ways to be able to deal a lot of wounds now that I have the other bases covered. And the game presents you with a bunch of these challenges, right? So you have the necessity to deal wounds to a monster. You need to be able to break their armor. After every fight, you get hungry. So you better hope that you've stocked up on enough food to actually not starve after beating the monster, because, revenge is hungry work. And so that's something that I was trying to build in, and I was really happy to hear Liz talk about the responsibility and the fact that it is your choice that drive the outcome. Because, and I like the one-deck dungeon as well, because I think it's done so many things in such a great way. The way that it's portable, the way that it's approachable. But sometimes in it, you have this role, and you just your arms drop and well, that's a lot of ones. How is this even possible, right? And there is nothing that you did wrong. It's just a very bad roll. And sure, your skills can mitigate it to some extent, but it all starts with just how lucky you were. And that always felt a little unsatisfying for me, because it could be a cakewalk or, a totally brutal kind of masochism fest based solely on that initial roll. And I love that there are mitigation ways in it, but for me, the mitigation was always more fun than the rolling. And that's kind of what Unbroken is. It's all decisions with then a small bit of luck in what are the circumstances that you need to overcome.
So, in One Deck Dungeon, you fight a lot. You fight over 20, 30 times or something like that. How many fights are there in Unbroken?
There are 4.
So 4 fights. There's just 4.
4 fights. Yeah. And one thing, again, I'm not sure if I'm going to get Chris mad at me for saying this, but after a while playing in Unbroken, those fights, if you look at it, there's really only one major fight at the end of One Deck Dungeon, the boss fight, right? All the other things is just how much bad stuff do you take on in order to get that benefit, because you're going to get that benefit whether you lose or you succeed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, these almost felt kind of procedural, and what I really wanted to get to was the fun big boss fight at the end, because that always had character, that always had kind of the stakes at it. So for Unbroken, what I really tried to do is to have less fights, but have every one of these fights have a little bit of a character of their own. So every one of the 24 monsters that Unbroken comes with has a little bit of a specific, unique feel to them that I hope people experience as they play them. Whether you're fighting a very agile gnoll that can dodge a whole lot of blows that you better not come in swinging at him with big heavy hits because he just shrugs them off, versus fighting a big armored ogre who has a ton of armor that you can use, your cunning to try to strip it away from him piece by piece to expose the weak bits. So what I really tried to do was to have less of that content, but make every piece of it feel more unique and memorable.
So, Artem, can I cut in here?
Please do.
So I also wanted to add that not only are the fights fewer and further between, but one of the things that makes Unbroken unique to me is that you are able to avoid 3 out of 4 of the boss fights if you have the right resources or if you scouted ahead and you're prepared for that. So while you're sort of managing your character, you can actually stock up to sort of bribe or sneak past some of the monsters, which leaves you a little bit stronger for the next fight. So if your first boss fight totally wipes you out, you can find ways to manipulate your resources and skip the second one to leave you tougher for the third one. And there's a price that you pay for that in terms of not getting rewards for defeating a monster. But it also gives you a little bit of a breather if you're getting really hammered in the game. It also gives me a feeling of stealth, which I enjoy.
So for me, I was very happy to hear Liz mention that feeling of stealth, because Unbroken was always meant to be this kind of like desperate, a little scared of what's coming up feeling that a player would have, and the opportunity to trick a monster was never presented as a first option that you go for, but rather something that you do in order to stay alive for longer, so that, fight another day kind of mentality. And it is a suboptimal choice most of the time, but it does allow you to keep going, which was for me very important, to not have the game end too soon and to feel like a player at least had a chance to get to, at least the last monster and to have the best shot that they could to beat that.
So, Liz, from your perspective, the different kinds of monsters that Artem was mentioning, did they feel different in your plays?
They do, actually. One thing that's kind of cool is that you can choose there's 4 levels of the game. And in each level, you have a certain amount of time to spend kind of hunting around for resources. One of the actions that you can choose to take is to scout. So you can either choose to scout pretty early and then prepare for a monster, or you can say, I got this. I'll just see how it plays out. And then you spend all of your time.
I love that. I love it. Who needs to flip that tile? I'm going in.
Leroy Jenkins. Yes. James, nice.
So, or yeah, you can spend your time and just hope for the best. And it kind of depends on how desperate you are, if that makes sense. It could be, if I spend the resources that I need to scout now, like I won't beat anything that I find. But each of the monsters is a little bit different. Some of them have special attacks. Like if you have treasure, you get attacked. Or they have different sets of attacks that they can use against you. Some of them have armor. Some of them give you conditions. So there's like a spider that poisons you. There are, I in my playthrough, I ran into a creature that gave me a panicked condition for the entire next round. So I had to, it adjusted, and it was paranoid. It adjusted the way that I had to like draw cards when I was exploring, and so it had lasting consequences for me. So each of those monsters actually does something different, and if you don't prepare, so we talked about preparing well and being flexible. What that means is that you can spend one level preparing for one kind of monster and then scout something totally different in the next round. So you have to change the way that you're strategizing in order to make sure that you have a shot at succeeding.
I also want to pick up the point that you made, Liz, about the choice that you make on whether to spend the resources and take a more cautious approach and to know exactly what you're heading into versus the Leroy Jenkins approach, which is just like stockpile as much as you can and hope for the best. That was very much by intent. And to me, having this kind of a decision in the game is a kind of push your luck element where you can take the cautious approach, but it will give you less to work with, or you can just hedge your bets that you are prepared for as many potential scenarios as you could and just not waste any resources trying to understand what's exactly in front of you and just say that you're putting it all in and, just let's do it, which was always a fun sort of duality in how different people approach games, and I think Unbroken really caters well to both playstyles.
And I actually like it thematically too. I sort of imagine myself like slinking through a dungeon, and maybe I can peek around a corner and catch sight of what's looking for me and know that I can look for it too. Or, maybe I'm just frantically going from room to room looking for some resources until it's like, all right, it's time to go out and face this thing.
Well, and actually picking up on that, thematically, it's a good opportunity to say that, as you mentioned, you only have a certain time to do all of the things that you want to do to prepare for the fight.
But actually, I mean, that's really all the questions that I have. I mean, it just looks like an interesting little game. So, I mean, what are the big plans for the Kickstarter? I mean, like in terms of stretch goal content and, time, stuff you have in mind for the future. Are you do you have some like ideas in mind, or is this just kind of like, let's figure this out as we go?
So for the campaign, one of the fun things that we're going to be doing is, I really like this world that we managed to build, both through this kind of bleak outlook that defines the start of the game, and through the art that we were very lucky to get a very good artist that I think did a great job at visualizing all of this the caverns and the monsters. So we wanted to learn more about the game, about the monsters in it. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is, as hopefully we get funding, we're going to unlock these little backstories for every monster, telling people about sort of the circumstances that led to that monster encountering the player character, which is hopefully something that people will appreciate as they get to learn more about the enemies that they meet, especially because the campaign will allow some sort of cosmetic modification of monsters, specifically in the naming of monsters by backers. That's just a fun little thing that I like to plug into my campaigns. Another cool thing, well, I'm not actually going to talk too much about all the cool things that we do have planned. I'll just say that they are there, and people are welcome to drop by the Kickstarter page to check out, especially if we start to get to unlock some of the stretch goals. This being a solo game, so the scoring being an opportunity, we do have some plans for like an online scoring tool where people can compare how well they did to some of the high scores, and build a little bit of a community around it. And as for the future of it, Unbroken was always built as a sort of a flexible foundation that we can easily add things down the road. And in fact, we already do have some draft designs around an expansion that would add new monsters and new characters and maybe even new resources and new ways to deal with monsters, be it some wildly unpredictable, dangerous yet powerful magic, or ranged attacks that you can use to damage monsters sort of even before you encounter them. And all of these things, I think, I'm always very interesting to see how ideas from the base game mix with the expansion. So it's interesting how the mechanics that get introduced in the expansion are meshing with existing threats from the base game, and how some of the strategies from the base game can or no longer are effective against new monsters. For example, you saw that you had this completely bulletproof idea about how to deal with all monsters in the base game, and you start taking it through, and then you encounter something completely new, and it just wrecks all of your plans. And I'm very grateful for the very active community that we have over on Board Game Geek, who have been giving some great ideas about some of the potential content for the expansion. And one of my biggest hopes is that the Kickstarter for the base campaign will help us build and expand that community so that we can get a whole lot of ideas in, and to really pick the best to carry into the expansion, and to keep building this game and to keep giving people variety and challenge.
Well, that's what this episode and these previous series are all about. Expand into all sorts of different communities, and get the word out there. And hopefully, if you're out there and you're wondering about, what is this Unbroken? Should I back it? I already have one that dungeon. I think the message is that this game was crafted with a lot of our favorite solo games, short solo games in mind, and has said, okay, what can I do different? How can I move the ball forward here and there? I think you did really good to articulate how this game kind of fits into that constellation and offers something that's perhaps distinct and that people might like.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on your show, which I personally enjoy very much. And thank you so much, Liz, for both being here and sharing your impressions of the game, and for playing the game. I think one thing that I've learned going through this experience is that for people who like to play games by themselves, solo players are a fantastic community of people who are extremely friendly, kind with their time, and are just so constructive and encouraging. And it's, if nothing else, I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to make the connections that I have made and to be a part of this community.
Thanks for involving me in your game. It was my pleasure to play it. So good luck.
You hear that, Liz? You're amazing.
You just don't know me well enough yet.
That's going to go ahead and do it for another episode of the Every Night is Game Night Preview Series. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to Liz from Beyond Solitaire, who you may be hearing more from in the future. We're in negotiations to get her to contribute a little bit more to our podcast, so we're looking forward to that. Thank you, Artem, for spending some time, despite some of the internet troubles, go ahead and stay tuned after the music for a blooper section, a lot of little adventures putting this episode together, getting it recorded and out to you. So hope you have a little bit of fun with that. So you can reach us at ENGN_podcast. We can also find me lurking, Jason Perez, at the Solo Community, Facebook group, One Player Guild, all sorts of places. I am so happy to just talk to players, talk to designers, talk to publishers, whoever is playing games, making games. We definitely want you guys on the show. I'm going to ask for this every single time, ladies and gentlemen. Please go to iTunes and rate us 5 stars or however many stars you think we deserve. Rate us on iTunes and Stitcher and SoundCloud and all that good stuff. So that's going to do it. See you next time, which will be right around the corner. Later, everybody. Well, there goes that Canadian internet.
Don't worry, it'll apologize.
No. Wait, I need to pour maple syrup on my modem.
Oh my goodness,
that's how it
that's
works.
so funny. That's so funny.
If you can just tell me when it gets back to normal, that would be great.
It'll pop back into normal a little bit.
Is my internet still okay?
Yes, yeah. Let's get it in before.
I'll just keep going
before you get gnawed on by a squirrel.
Yes. Actually, it's raccoons here.
Oh, raccoon!
Yeah.
I actually have a video of one of my students being attacked by a squirrel in Canada. They said, "Do not get food out in front of the squirrel," and he did, and it jumped on his leg.
Rookie mistake. Rookie mistakes. Our squirrels are vicious.